By my count, we have 21 participants this evening. I think that's our largest participation of a virtual meeting all through COVID. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening. If you see me kind of taking a second to stop, that's just me checking the participant list just to make sure that we have everybody that wanted to access on. Yeah, as you heard Ronald mention at the top of the slide deck, hopefully everybody can see the presentation. If you want to go to menti.com, type that into your URL. You can use that on a smart device or your desktop computer, laptop, and type in that code. It'll allow you to access this presentation. I used Mentimeter to create this presentation, and it'll be interactive. So please enter that URL, either your phone or your computer. There are a couple of sections in this presentation where you're actually going to have to jump on the presentation and drop your comments in the box or fill in a survey, just using a different platform if you've never used it before to get a little more interactive, just in case, some folks may not want to speak openly. Discussion is very much encouraged, but if you would prefer to just drop in an anonymous comment or thought in certain parts of the presentation, that's what the Menti platform is there for. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we attempted to do this 2 months ago, would have been our very first virtual workshop coming back from our COVID break besides our business meetings. Unfortunately, my bandwidth didn't allow me to facilitate the meeting, so that's why we're doing it now. Last month, we held a workshop with John Shear, who is the program manager for the State Department of Health's COVID vaccination response. That was a great presentation, and we are still working through our email distribution platform. But all this information will be available. A recording of last month's workshop, this recording, and the presentation can be made available. So for those of you that are kind of on the fence, I know most of you by name and by face, but for most of you that are on the fence that didn't know, the Island Preparedness Group is our newly rebranded organization, nonprofit organization for Leeward Oahu, taking the work of the Waianae Coast Disaster Readiness Team, or Waianae Ready, and the EVA Emergency Preparedness Committee, and kind of joining efforts for one nonprofit for Leeward Oahu. I guess our quote unquote mission statement is to foster community resilience through emergency preparedness education. And this meeting is being recorded, so we'll go ahead and get started. Let me see if I can advance the slides. Okay, Ronald, can you give me a heads up that you saw the slide advance on the Zoom screen?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we're here to conduct a very informal TTX, and TTX stands for Tabletop Exercise. Specifically, we'll be delving into a hurricane scenario. So, for those of you that have concerns with the tsunami incident or fire or other kind of hazards that affect our community, kind of put that on hold, although the same preparedness actions are kind of across the board. But we will be focusing on hurricane this evening, a tabletop exercise. So tabletop exercises are discussion-based sessions where team members meet in an informal classroom setting to discuss their roles during an emergency and their responses to a particular emergency situation. A facilitator guides participants through a discussion of one or more scenarios. So we'll be going through a hurricane scenario this evening, and obviously virtual. And that link is there for you, kind of beyond the scope of tonight's presentation. If you want to find out more about conducting exercises or kind of the methodology I used to put this together this evening. So the Ttx objectives are: 1, creates a venue for open discussion in a stress-free environment. So don't feel like you have to have all the answers. Don't feel like there is a right or wrong answer. This is an open discussion just to get thoughts flowing, to see where we are as a community in our current capacity. And then the third objective is to potentially develop plans and potential applications. So many of you know that we recently received a grant from Hawaii Community Foundation. And part of doing this TTX 2 months ago was to kind of bring up the discussion and see what the community's thoughts were, to see how we can apply that grant to some of the more tangible needs in our community. And by all means, please stop me at any point if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. So TTX assumptions, no judgment participation. No one's being judged here. Again, no right or wrong answers. We have to speak openly and realistically. If not, we are not practically planning, right? We can say we want storage in every community. We can say we want response vehicles and helicopters and all these things, but if they're not practical, they're not helpful. So what can we bring to the table tonight to hopefully help us develop plans in the future? TTX assumption, if it were to happen now, what can you do now, not later? So as we go through the scenario, consider real world, hurricanes on the horizon now. What can you do now? Don't say that, I'm going to have a 50-gallon container of water if you don't realistically have that now as a scenario. You can talk in a sense of you plan to implement preparedness actions in the future, but really, as we go through the scenario, it is about what you have capable at this moment. Because, realistically, Felicia or Guillermo could have been, crossing the Central Pacific as a hurricane as we speak. And these are just additional assumptions. So over the years, the EVA EPC kind of started in 2011. The YNAG group started in 2014. And over the course of that period, community has grown its knowledge of hurricane hazard and our understanding of what hurricane is. And I know the group this evening is at different skill levels, and don't get me wrong, I'm not the expert, but kind of this is the benchmark of information that the public should be aware of. And then the second link is just a coverage map. So for those of you, we're not going to go into it, but for those of you that have seen the National Weather Service's hurricane page, it's got 3 maps covering the Central Pacific, the Eastern Pacific, and the Atlantic basins. Just wanting to understand that part. And this is kind of the planning map of the Eastern Pacific, kind of on the eastern seaboard, western seaboard of the continental United States. And if you can see, there's a thicker line moving west between Hawaii and, let's say, California, and that's the 140-degree west longitude line, which separates the Central Pacific, where Hawaii sits, from the Eastern Pacific. And that line is very critical in for a number of reasons, but if a hurricane is generated in the Central Pacific, obviously that's closer to Hawaii, and hurricane, as we know in the last week or so, hurricane crosses from the Eastern Pacific.
Hi, Pono. Can I mention something?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, this is Crystal, everyone. Formerly working for the City Department of Emergency Management, I just wanted to let you folks know, once it crosses that 140-degree longitude line, west longitude line, that's when government officials from state and city are planning to prepare, because once it crosses that longitude line, that 140 line, that's when everything starts rolling. Basically, once it crosses, we have about anywhere between 3 to 5 days. So that's why it's so critical Once it comes into that Central Pacific water, that's when everyone starts really paying attention and getting prepared. And so that should go for all of us who's on this webinar right now. That 140 is critical for all of us to make sure that we're prepared. So if anything does approach the islands, we have everything in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. There are other assumptions, kind of, if you wanted to go back through the National Weather Service's website or state HIEMA or the county DEM or even others like Hawaiian Electric or UHC Grant, there's all kinds of great information. We can sit here and talk about the miles per hour per hurricane category 1 through 5, or some of the hazards associated with hurricane, but I'm not going to go through that right now because we are simulating a hurricane, and realistically, not everybody's going to know that information. So I really want to base this exercise off of your current knowledge. And again, we have folks from every level of the spectrum here tonight. So we'll go ahead and continue. So this is kind of just a inject of, this was going around social media several weeks ago, and I'll just read it for you. Since we are under a severe thunderstorm watch this evening, it's a good time to go over the difference between a watch and a warning. A watch, we have the ingredients to make tacos. A warning, we are having tacos right now. So kind of a joke that went around, but it's very important to know the difference between a watch and a warning. And when you receive that information from the National Weather Service and local government, a watch is issued approximately 48 hours out of when severe weather is expected. A warning is issued 36 hours out. And I guess the joke for this post on social media is, for a watch, we have the ingredients to make a hurricane. It may or may not impact us, but when a warning is issued, tacos are already made. They're more than likely gonna impact us.
And Normal, Illinois is close to Peoria, my hometown.
It's funny you mentioned that, Rodney, because I actually had to look up if that was a real city. I thought the whole thing was a joke. I thought it was a fictional fire department, but that's a real place.
Yeah, they actually did it. There are others doing the same thing, and basically it's to get people to be aware that watch is to prepare and warning is ready to take action, or in this case, to grind.
Thank you. So we'll jump right into the scenario. So, nothing having to do with Hurricane Maria that impacted Puerto Rico several years ago. I did a quick Google search of the most common name worldwide, and it just so happened to be Maria. So please don't relate this to Puerto Rico in, I believe, 2017 or 2018. But that's just our fictional hurricane's name, Hurricane Maria. So just to stop us there and say this is kind of, instructions are over and we're going to jump into a scenario. If you could put yourself in the mindset of, as we go along this, I have certain benchmarks at certain periods of 5 days out of hurricane making impact, a day out, and then a day after hurricane. So you'll see what I'm talking about, but kind of put yourself in the sense of there's a hurricane on the horizon. And if you're curious, this is a photo from the International Space Station of Hurricane Lane in 2018, I believe. So scenario, 5 days out, Hurricane Maria crosses into the Central Pacific as a Category 5 cyclone. Local officials continue to advise residents to prepare as severe weather may be possible over the next several days. So if you remember that map and what Crystal mentioned about the 140-degree west longitude line, is hurricane Category 5, obviously the stronger end of the spectrum. across the Central Pacific line, from your experience, whether you're from Hawaii, whether you're from different places, kind of what is the buzz happening around the community? What are you doing? Bonus points for anybody that can guess where that photo was taken.
Costco.
I think that's Sean. You said Costco.
Yeah, Costco.
Yeah, Costco Evile.
Oh, evil.
Yeah, so with that scenario, 5 days out, now we're going to go to the Menti platform. Again, for those of you joining us after our initial instructions, you can go to menti.com, either on a smart device or your website, or the website. Punch in that 8-digit code, and you'll follow along the presentation. But this is an interactive part, so go ahead, even if you want to just test the platform for us to use in the future, go ahead and drop a comment. So hurricane's 5 days out, what do you do? Or if anybody wants to come up on the mic and kind of give us, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts? Okay, so review my inventory. Make sure to check all my supplies and food storage. Again, the comment feature on Mentimeter is anonymous, or if anybody would like to come up and share, that'd be fine too. Make sure all rechargeable items are fully charged. Make sure you keep a full tank of gas in your automobile. Check communication standby procedures. And I think you can drop more comments. By all means, feel free. Sky's the limit. I'll jump in there too. "5 days out, don't panic. Recheck my emergency plan, ensure we have all our important documents, and charge up all our electronics and backup batteries. 5 days out, inventory and fill up water, containers, and fuel." We can get a couple more in there. So quite a few of them are about supplies, food, water, powered items. A couple of mentions of your plan. So hurricane is 5 days out. Check on supplies to make sure and any emergency equipment is close by. 5 days out, monitor communications, stock up on water, review my list of things I should have already done, trim trees, ready window coverings, then check on everything I might need, food, fuel, and get anything I might have forgotten to get ahead of time, food, water, fuel. 5 days out, give heads up to family and friends, encourage them to be prepared. Okay, and whether you consider these some of the more basic preparedness items, or maybe you haven't even started yet. You know, when we do our community presentations, we kind of follow the FEMA mantra of build a kit, make a plan, and be informed. And that's really kind of the things that you're doing now, 5 days out of hurricane, or hopefully way before hurricane, but kind of the idea should be 5 days out, you're really just reviewing things. You're not taking your preparedness actions down. You're not going to the store to go buy your 14 days of water. You're checking to make sure that your 14 days of water is good to go. 5 days out, if a volunteer, prep for shelter and responsibilities, take care of housing and go over emergency plan with family. Make sure you tie down and put away things that might fly away from your yard. whether or not you were the one that dropped any of these comments, does anything jump out at anybody? Maybe some of these comments, maybe they're things that you didn't even consider. Discuss with family where we'd all shelter from tropical storm force winds versus major hurricanes. Get rest of our ohana involved, help where we can. Okay, great. At some point, so kind of moving forward, at some point in that period of 5 days, you're going to have to decide, and the hurricane's going to stay, for this scenario, it's going to stay a category 5. But as it gets closer, let's say 4 days or 3 days, and local officials start talking about opening shelters, start thinking about where you're going to go, where you're going to be.
I don't think it's safe anywhere.
Valid thoughts. I see a few more. Are any shelters made to withstand Cat 5 hurricane is the main question. Nope. Did the rest of our ohana involved help? Oh, we got that one already. So all good thoughts. Question.
Right there.
So personal preparedness and your family, is there anything, so what do you do? Does anybody have to do anything special for work, your employment? Or maybe you've got special considerations like you have a family member that has access or functional needs, or maybe they have to go to hospital every day for dialysis, or
Hey, Pono. As for me, I will make sure I have all my, since I'm diabetic, make sure I have all my medical supplies all set up for coolers. Fortunately for me, my insulins can go without refrigeration for quite a while. So I keep a supply already in bags in the fridge. I just pull them out as I just grab and go.
Okay, very good, very good. Question is, you have prescription medication. Do you have enough to sustain, if hurricane really did make impact, sustain for 14 days or 21 days or 28 days? No one have any special considerations for work? I know we kind of dropped in the comments already, kind of hardening our homes, or you can extend it to hardening your workplace.
Hey, so Pono, for work, due to the fact that I work for DOD, and we're essential personnel, they are telling us that we can't leave our jobs, that our families at home have to make sure that they're prepared, and we would get locked on base. So as far as work goes, it's either calling in sick and knowing the fact that the hurricane's gonna hit, or we're stuck. So we gotta make sure our family is taken care of.
Okay, very good.
Pono, since I work remotely to New York, obviously I have to let my management know that something's coming our way. They kind of know things go on differently here, so they're pretty understanding. I also have family who's in the Northeast, people who I consider my family, who I kind of have to let them know ahead of time. And I kind of have a plan put aside where I have a central person who I'll contact, and they will disseminate information, especially since I have a person who is very close to me. She's in her 90s, and she'll panic if she doesn't know that you're okay. So I have somebody who will contact her and let us know. So they need to have some kind of communication ways to get to people who don't know the geography of the islands here, because they're up on the mainland and they don't know things. So that's the considerations that I have to take care of as well, and letting the people know at the hospital in New York that. I'm sorry, what?
I think somebody jumped in with you. Was that all?
That was it. That was it. I thought somebody was replying back to me.
Yeah, thank you. That brings up a great point. So I know I mentioned that we weren't going to talk about basic preparedness. We'd save that for a future workshop. and whether we get DEM or HIEM or somebody to do a preparedness presentation. But there's some basic things in there that we may forget, especially through COVID. And because we haven't been doing this on a monthly basis, we kind of become complacent of. But having a out-of-state contact, you know, in different parts of the country, you may have a neighboring county contact, but here in Hawaii, it's good to have an out-of-state contact, because when our telecommunication system becomes overwhelmed and I can't talk to you across the street, maybe we can get outside to a different state and we can use a point of contact in a different state as a relay. So that's a good one. Special considerations, you know, going back to the FEMA mantra of build a kit, right? Build a kit with your food, water, clothing, and you want to consider the things that we don't think about: medication, or an extra set of glasses, or just things to occupy our time if the power goes out. You know, I don't know how many of us actually play board games anymore, or maybe keep a crossword puzzle or a book, maybe a deck of cards. But you can go stir crazy when you don't have access to power and internet. So build a kit, right? We've got a bunch of great resources that we've shared, and we can continue to share about stuff that you should consider in your kit. Make a plan. So talking about where you're going to go, right? We know that maybe a structure can withstand a category 1. Maybe it can't withstand something greater. So maybe considering not just the shelter in your community, you may have to consider the shelter in a neighboring community, because that's where you were. Or how many of us actually travel and research? Let's say we're going to go to Las Vegas, and I know Las Vegas has different types of hazards, but you know, do you know where the shelters are for the type of hazards that they have in Las Vegas? And lastly is be informed. Where are you getting your information from? Make sure they're credible sources. That's why I will continue to preach, you know, government sources: National Weather Service, state HIEMA, county DEM. Local media should be regurgitating the same information. Radio, you know, regular FM, AM radio, although there are some broadcasters that may be questionable, hopefully they're getting out the right information. So those are all great comments, and we're going to build on those, and let's go ahead and move forward. So again, scenario is we are 5 days out of impact. Hurricane category 5 is crossing over the Central Pacific line.
Hey, Pono.
Yes.
This is Ralph. What I do sometimes, because I work at the office, I send out text message from my email, my civilian email, and I can answer back and forth. So if I have an emergency, I'll just copy and paste from the notepad in my Gmail text message and send them the basic stuff to the family, and they know what's going on. They can answer back on that specific text for the time being. So that's another option I do.
Okay, very good. Having alternate forms of communication. So we know, again, traditional phone call may take up more bandwidth than a text message. So sending text messages during times when we know that a lot of people are going to be inundating cell towers with, you know, phone call, it may be more efficient to send text messages. Or if it's not so critical, maybe email. Or I know there are some mesh apps, but let's not get too advanced into that. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions or comments?
Is there any update from state or city and county about shelter capabilities? Cat 1, Cat 2 maybe, but on that?
Crystal, you want to take that one?
Sure. If you folks ever wanted to get more information, go to honolulu.gov/DEM. It actually has a lot of the hurricane information, including the shelter and how we actually selected. In previous years, you folks might remember it would be a lot of the DOE schools. It's no longer that way. So please make sure that you listen to the TV or news, radio, because we will be announced, or the city will be announcing what shelters will be open, because they've actually done assessments on the various buildings and facilities. And so
Mhm.
they've selected the very best based on structural engineers and assessments that were conducted. So it's limited than what we've had in previous years.
Yep. Because none of our buildings is meant to withstand.
And if I may, right before Crystal's departure, city released its new, well, I mean, it was around, but they did a press release on the ArcGIS website that's got the shelters, the new shelter lists plotted on the map.
Yes.
And why not on it?
We have two out on the Waianae coast. So it's limited. It's not the normal ones that we've used in the past. So for that area, we have Nanakuli Elementary School, because we found that the buildings at the elementary school I guess the structural integrity of those buildings were much stronger than those of the high school, intermediate high school. And the other one was out at Kamaili Academy. So those are the two. Yeah, so please go on the website, because it does have a listing mapped out so that it's easily identifiable. The shelters that most people are used to going may no longer be on that list.
Just to stress, it's very important to check the website, and don't just depend on the website. You've actually got to listen to officials during disaster, because the list is going to change, or it may identify 4 different shelters in Leeward Oahu, but not all 4 may open. So you really got to pay attention to what's put out at that specific incident. But for example, we know over the last couple of years, we've opened shelters at Lehoku Elementary, Nanakuli High and Intermediate, Kapolei High School, and Campbell in the Eva Beach Library. But that's different now. So always make sure you have the updated information.
See if I can add something to that. I think I'd be a little nervous to go to Nanakuli L with the ancient buildings just across the street from most of it. And if Cat 5 hits, most of that, the old elementary school is going to pretty much disappear and be flying up in everybody's face, depending on where it's going to come from. But the new Nanakuli L is a much newer building, so it has a tendency to be much stronger. I don't think we have any stand up to a Cat 5. That's just
that is correct. Yeah. So remember, this is the best available refuge areas that have been through a assessment, structural assessment, but not just because we say it's going to be Nanakuli Elementary. It's not every single building or every single classroom. When they did the assessments, it's selected buildings and selected areas that will be used for refuge or for shelter.
So transitioning from this conversation, we'll bring it up again. I don't want to get too deep into it, but this is definitely a topic for another slide. So we'll go ahead and move on. So scenario hurricane is 36 hours out. Hurricane Maria continues to strengthen as it tracks south of the Hawaiian Islands. Images from Hawaii and Maui counties show severe flooding and storm surge, fallen trees and downed utility poles, damage to businesses and residences. Local officials have issued a warning for Oahu, urging residents to seek shelter. So with that, 36 hours out, hurricane is already passing by Hawaii and Maui counties. Oahu is on a warning. And what's good about kind of our proximity west of Hawaii and Maui County is we see the impacts that they face before ours. So we kind of get an idea of what's happening. Again, brownie points, if someone can identify the location of this picture or general whereabouts.
That's Maui.
Yeah, I'm not even exactly sure. Could be Maui, could be Hilo, but I'm guessing. I didn't really find out where. But thank you. So, hurricane is 36 hours out. We are in warning. We are seeing weather where are you? So this is kind of the question going back to what Crystal just mentioned. So the city puts out, I guess you can call it 3 different levels or the mantra of shelter in place. So if you know that your home is hardened, and we're not going to go into specifics, but there's great information put up by UHC grant, the homeowner's handbook for, oh shoot, I can't remember the title anymore. Irregardless, that link has been shared and reshared, and we will share it again. UHC grant puts out a great book on how to harden your home. So first thing to do is to consider, is your home hardened to the point where you can stay home? Second is seek shelter with family or friends, right? Maybe you have a relative or you have a close friend that lives in a concrete structure, or their home is hardened. They have hurricane clips installed in their home. And they've got a continuous load path kind of built in their structure. And then lastly is to seek refuge at a public shelter. So for many of us, I would assume in this group, I don't know how many of us actually purposefully seek out shelter at one of those shelters during hurricane. I know many of us are there because we're volunteers, but if we had the option, we probably wouldn't be at the shelter. So I just ask, where are you going to be? Either out of those 3 places, home, could be work, could be a relative's home, could be a refuge, shelter. Where are you going to be and maybe why?
You can't answer why.
So somebody put home, windows covered, etc. Yeah, the homeowner's handbook also talks about things that you can do to retrofit your home pre-hurricane. Like there are a number of different vendors and different types of materials that you can use to cover your windows. Kind of a general question, rhetorical question to the group. Is it better to open your windows or close your windows, or open your doors or close your doors when you got heavy wind from hurricane? Oh, nobody want to guess? Yeah, it's you
Keep your
definitely want.
windows closed. If the hurricane wants the windows open, it'll do it itself.
Harden your home. Go ahead.
I was kind of wondering, at one point I did hear advice to have at least some kind of opening to the interior for airflow, as high winds create a low pressure, kind of a low pressure focal point, and if your house is not at the same pressure point, you can actually start bursting things.
So maybe there's a scientific article out there, but according to the homeowner's handbook and UHC grant, it's best to keep everything closed so your structure actually acts as a unit. Because once you open something and air pressure is allowed to kind of focus in one area, then it's likely to tear that apart.
Now, there are videos out there you can see where there were tests done, and actually in this case with tornadoes, so you have a tighter wind window there, where they showed, okay, here's the same structure, solid, all done. Here's leave a door open or leave a window cracked, and the wind gets in there, and now the pressure is building from the inside, finding whatever the nearest weakness is and blowing it out. You can find these videos on YouTube by the different companies that are involved in structural hardening of the homes. So you do not want to have anything open. There's no such thing as a pressure differential. You're better off just stay inside, sealed. Don't worry about it, because if you open that pressure, it's going to go in and now start blowing from the inside out.
That is correct, Ronald. Thank you. Yeah, you want to keep an envelope of your house, everything closed up. And you want to put as many walls between you and that hurricane force wind. So an interior room, like a bathroom, a closet where there's no windows or minimal window, just as many walls as you can, put yourself between you and that hurricane force wind.
So I really want to hear in this scenario, you know, maybe not generically where you are, but what are you doing at a hurricane warning? We're seeing rain, we're seeing wind. Because it's still a little ways out, we're seeing, you know, sea level rise, but we're not seeing so much storm surge. Well, where are you? Because many of us are volunteers, and we may be doing volunteer things. We may be sheltered at a location, but we may be out and about, or you know, maybe for work. Kind of where are you in the thought process of 36 hours out? Are you moving? Are you not moving? Are you going out to watch the surfers? Or no right or wrong answers?
Given my current situation, I'd probably be locked down in the airport because they have a tendency whenever we even get minor storm warnings to pull in as much crew as they can, because the place does have a lot of leaks in it, and when you start pouring water all over it, you find a lot of things that didn't used to leak do now. And we have elevator shafts that have a tendency to act as very good gravity drains, so there's always that to deal with. So I don't know. If I was at work, I probably wouldn't be able to get away from work. But hopefully everything's going to work out. I'm trying to make everything right on this end of it too.
And you know, I asked this question generically. In my mind, I'm envisioning that I don't know anything. I don't know where everybody's going to be, because in the past, as now talking about us being an organization, we've tried to prepare to do things like other communities may, after hurricane, get ready to mobilize CERT teams, or get ready to do all these great things. And I really want to know where everybody would be in this situation. Obviously, as a community of volunteers, we would not be actively outdoors at this time, right? You'd be taking care of your families, you'd be, you know, work or whatever. But just to get a sense of where everyone's at, if we do have the capacity to then mobilize some kind of way, that's why I asked, because if that is not the thought that's going through everyone's mind, then we are definitely not going to go that route. No thoughts, which is okay. And that's why I stress. So kind of getting an idea of where we all are as individuals, and then now as you know, when we progress through the slides, now thinking about us as a community organization, what are we doing? And that's why in the past I've stressed, you know, one thing we can do is communicate. We don't even have to leave our homes, put ourselves in danger to be able to communicate with each other. Maybe you see damage that, you know, I can't see, and to be able to communicate that to the team, and then the team can communicate that to local officials, then that can definitely be a force multiplier throughout our community. Cars loaded, ready to go. Rodney, did you put that in there?
Yeah, I tried to finish it, ready to go to the shelter to volunteer, but it wouldn't let me.
Got you. So we'll move forward and you know, keep these thoughts in the back of your mind. So scenario, hurricane has passed. We are 1 day past weather, the severe weather. Hurricane Maria has weakened to a tropical storm as it continues to track west of Kauai. As the weather slowly clears, local officials begin initial assessments. Shelters and hospitals are open, but many neighborhoods are isolated due to roadway debris. Widespread power outages have nearly cut off all telecommunications. And for this next one, it's a YouTube video. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I have a funny feeling that to buffer a video on my end and for you to see it in real time is going to be challenging. At least there's going to be a lag. I've never had good experience with a video over Zoom. So the link is On the next slide, I'm going to ask you through your menti.com, or you can just copy paste the link and watch the video. The audio isn't critical, so you can turn the audio of the video off. It's a YouTube video. It's a YouTube video of a individual driving around Puerto Rico. I don't know, some city or town in Puerto Rico, several days after Hurricane Maria. And I just want you to take note and observe what you see as this person is taking their drive following a hurricane. You go ahead and take your time. We can call this a break if you want to watch this video. I think it's only about three minutes or so. Get up, grab a drink, watch the video, see what you observe. We'll call this a 5-minute break. So, is that about the end of the video? Okay.
Got about 3 minutes left on the video.
Oh, okay. Just seeing some of the comments in the chat. This is the first time I'm looking at the chat since we started. Thanks, Ahmad, for sharing the link to the homeowner's handbook to prepare for natural hazards. It's there in the chat if you guys want to check that out for how to harden your home for hurricane, tsunami, going down. A lot of great comments, and definitely this isn't a productive meeting if we don't capture any of this information and use it somehow. So anything you guys have to share is greatly appreciated. One comment, I kind of want to get away. So we talk about Cat 3 or Cat 4 or Cat 5 or Cat 1 or tropical storm or whatever. So for the remainder of the scenario, let's kind of get away from that and kind of, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Don't worry so much about the category and what that means in miles per hour, but kind of focus more on how do we prepare for the worst. And I think the scenario right now, especially in Puerto Rico, there are parts of Puerto Rico still without communication. I believe about a year after Hurricane Maria impacted Puerto Rico, we had the amateur radio section manager. So really the guy responsible for amateur radio in Puerto Rico. He came to Hawaii, he gave us presentations, and he gave us some great insight on telecommunication was out, internet, cell phone. Amateur radio really jumped into action, and amateur radio is not there to replace regular communications, but just to fill that void when regular communications is impeded. So I don't want to make this so much about radio communication, but from that video, what did you observe? How would that, if this was Kapolei Parkway, or if this was Fort Weaver or Farrington Highway or Cam Highway or some, place here locally, what did you observe?
It did happen on Fort Weaver. It was just a gust of wind, clocking it at over 50 miles per hour for less than a minute, that took down one pole, and it looked like a war zone in 2011. So, it doesn't have to be a storm, like you said, Pono.
Yeah, over the last couple of years, we've had just severe rain. Crystal knows about in Aina Haina or East Honolulu and North Oahu. It was just rain and that caused severe flooding. It wasn't even a hurricane. So any other observations?
One thing that I'm kind of sensitive to when I'm watching that video is I have worked with street lighting, utilities, voltage that's either overhead or underground, and people just need to know just because the pole's down doesn't mean the power's off. Especially if you're in a structure where there's significant damage, you may actually want to kill the power coming in from the main. Especially if you got wall damage, you don't know what's hot and what you can get wrapped from. So to be safe, that and possibly even your gas. If you're at home, the house is severely damaged. If you can shut off the gas, shut off the gas.
So we're not going into too much detail right now, but Ruben is right. If you get to the point where you need to turn off your power, know where your breaker box is, know how to in series flip what switches. You flip the little ones first, then you flip the main to turn them back on. You flip the main, then you flip the little ones. We're not going into teaching right now, but kind of the theory, when to turn off your gas, knowing that you shouldn't turn on your gas. You should let the utility company do that, because there could be a rupture in the line and you could turn it back on and there could be an open flame, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of tidbits that we've picked up over the years that, again, we're going to capture. For example, you own a chainsaw. There's a telephone pole across the road. Obviously, a hurricane hit, so it's not the city's priority to get to certain areas. Don't just go in with your own chainsaw and go cut the utility pole, because in a place like Hawaii, or in relation to Puerto Rico, it may be weeks before we can ship in new utility poles. The utility company could actually reuse that damaged pole, but if you took your chainsaw to it, well then.
And just remember that, you know, when they say 14 days, that's a very, very baseline. Hopefully people, if they can, go ahead and prepare for 30 days or more, because you will be cut off for certain periods of time, and communications and everything else. So if it's available for people to do so, that's one of the goals. Also, as a shelter volunteer, I can't force people to stay in the shelter. If they want to leave, they leave, but we can tell them that it's not been cleared yet. We haven't got the all clear sign and there is danger out there. That's part of the training that we try to give to volunteers is, yeah, you're not going to physically hold back anybody if they want to leave, but you do have to try to tell them the circumstances of danger and safety.
So kind of sky's the limit with the video, but one of the obvious observations is the roadway is impeded. Maybe it's not blocked, maybe utilities came in, or maybe residents kind of moved some of the vegetation out of the way enough for this individual to drive around. I think this is about a week after impact. Any other observations that you could relate to things that could happen in our own community?
Pono, what scared me the most when watching the video, you know, like Ruben was saying, there were some power lines or lines that were down on the road. It may not be power lines, it could be infrastructure, it could be the fiber optics for Hawaiian Telecom or Spectrum or whoever. But as I saw the cars driving over it, maybe that could have been something that we could have salvaged if it wasn't still intact. Just know that it scared the heck out of me, you know, if it was a power line, but it also scared me to see if that was actually infrastructure that we could have salvaged to regain our internet service or comm service. You know, it could have worked had it been saved, but with everyone driving over it, you know, the repairs, the recovery would take that much longer as well.
Thank you, Chris. I wrote down salvage because I think that's gold in, you know, we've got a lot of gung-ho folks in our community that want to go bulldoze things during disaster and chainsaw things. But, you know, realistically, if we can save infrastructure, you know, hopefully that'll aid us in recovery. Maybe there's a way to write that into our own planning is when we educate people about not, you know, more considered effort about don't just go in and do whatever you think is going to help the community.
Also, in reference to paperwork, you know, the insurance, if you have a home or renter's insurance, all that paperwork you need to try to make sure that you have on you. You can have a digital copy of it, but, you know, having hard copy, that is also gold. And if you can take care of that, make sure you have that. That is something that will help you in the long-term recovery phase.
Maybe reading a little bit too much into the video, but this gentleman that came from Puerto Rico that kind of gave us a review of what happened within that first year of Hurricane Maria, he talked about rationing fuel. And that kind of alerted me because there was I think this gentleman passed by a gas station. So people would line up, whether their cars or on foot with their gas tanks, or gas cans, but they were rationing, you know, how many gallons each person could get. You know, maybe for folks with a Red Cross ID or government officials, they could fill up a full tank, obviously, because there's a critical need for them to get to work. But those kind of things are realistic and they could happen.
You might also remember, I've sat through both the most recent hurricanes here, and I saw what damage it did to the west side. Luckily, I learned to drive in snow, so driving on sand was pretty easy to master. But there's an awful lot of people out there, you know, slipping and sliding and getting gas out of the gas stations immediately afterwards, or within even a week or so afterwards. Not going to happen. You had to go clear to town or Waipahu or somebody place else, you know, that had a better power structure. There, I don't think there was any gas stations on the west side that were usable within about a week.
Good. Thank you, Glenn. So kind of transitioning from, so we observed what was in the video. Now asking, going back to us talking about us being an organized group of community volunteers, what may be out of an observation, do you have any ideas about what we could be doing as, again, community volunteers during this period? I know that's kind of a big question, sorry. As Rodney said, hitting the road, going to shelter, making sure that's okay. You know, a lot of times maybe you might be a shelter worker. You might be at the shelter during the actual impact of severe weather. But you might be stuck there thereafter. I know kind of a couple of us have discussions. Let's say as volunteers, we're asked to go to the shelter for a 12-hour period or a 24-hour period. And let's say we're at the shelter during that severe weather. Well, that 24 hours could be extended because the route home could be impeded. And you might just have to shelter just like another client at the shelter.
Yeah, and that's very realistic, you know, to have in your car or your supplies inside the shelter enough to get you by for whatever time frame, 3 days, 14 days if you have your car or whatever, because COVID is still prevalent, and COVID will have to be taken into consideration as far as space and availability.
Any other comments before we move on?
Oh no, I think what you can do really prevalent on based on what your situation is. I mean, you could be at home and you may be like, well, I can't get out to do anything because the roads around my home are all closed up. Or I could go out, but I have, family members who are either have an illness themselves or something that I have to be around to take care of, or just are panic stricken because, let's face it, people are going to become panic stricken as well because they don't know what they're going to do. So sometimes you as an individual, you may want to go out and help, but you really got to stay home and take care of your family, or maybe even your next door neighbor who you're close with. So I think everybody, it's a whole individual thing. You can't say, oh, I'm going to go do this, because the situation may change and I can't do what I intended. I have to kind of be able to be nimble and decide, okay, I have to do something else that's more important at this moment.
Thank you. That's a great comment. And I think that creates a challenge in what we're trying to do, because other communities may come up with plans to activate a team, for example. But that's kind of different from your thoughts, and I agree with your thoughts, is we really may not have a team. So, how do we work with who we're going to get spontaneously at that point? Or, just firing from the hip and shooting all these comments, and all this will be captured via video. Hopefully a plan can come out of this. Somebody else got their mic on?
One great item to do is just to know your neighbors and check and see. You might be able to help them. They might be able to help you. It's very hard to do sometimes, but in my case, I have a retired firefighter and a construction person next to me, and I've got a generator, and they've got other supplies, and we try to help each other if it comes down that we shelter in place.
This is an open-ended question, and by all means, don't feel like you have to answer, but knowing what I know from the comments that this gentleman said from Puerto Rico and surveying the audience tonight, this is a couple of days after a hurricane has impacted. Let's say no electricity, no communications, and let's say this is going on for a week period or longer. Where do you, let's say maybe you could drive a short distance or you have to go by foot. Where do you go to get help? And I know, again, that's very specific. If it's medically related, you're going to try to get to a hospital. But in a general sense, and I kind of have an answer that I think of, but I really want to know what others have to say. Where is the, let's call it, where is the community hub? Where are you going for help? You know, no power, so no groceries at stores, things like that. Where are you going for help in your community? Or maybe you don't need help. Maybe you're a prepper and you've got vast amounts of food storage and water, but in general, you know, for the common person in the community, where do they go for help?
I think specifically it depends on where we're at. So for myself and my family, we live close to the beach and don't have to rely on the resources such as, you know, fishing, whatever's in the ocean. I mean, if everything is dry, I'm talking about the grocery stores, there's no supplies. Everything, everywhere we go, there's no supplies. We would have to depend on the resources, natural resources around us.
Anybody else, first instinct, where do you go for help? Oh, and that's okay.
You know, in every community, there is a fire station. It may be difficult to get to. They may not even be at the station, but I found that most people will congregate there or to churches, any place that actually offers normally some type of service. On the west side, we have, you know, the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center. We have Queens West, you know, so we have Kaiser, you know, so there's different places I think people will tend to congregate to. But if at all possible, if community members such as yourselves, if there is a means to gather and support your community, or, you know, just at least your neighborhoods, that would help alleviate people having to go to the extreme. They can stay within their neighborhoods, stay off the roadways. That's kind of what I've seen in the past and what I hope will happen.
I agree.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Crystal, because kind of it was a loaded question on my part, because again, this gentleman from Puerto Rico was saying when they deployed amateur radio operators, they had 25 radio operators fly into Puerto Rico, or 25 or so, and plus the existing operators in Puerto Rico, they were kind of stationed at fire stations, and that's how they kept that communication link going. Was the hub was the fire station in each of those communities. So I don't know if that works, but that makes sense to me. Fire stations, hospitals. Thank you.
And also, if I may, because of COVID, a lot of these relationships that we've built up have kind of faded down. Now is a good time to reestablish or reconnect with everything Crystal was just saying and Pono was just saying, the fire stations, the community policing teams, the neighborhood security watches. They're established, and that's a great thing to be a part of. Or at least to know and have a relationship with them. And community policing teams are a part of that. We have a great relationship with our CPTs, as it is, community policing teams, and maybe we need to reestablish. And same thing with Queens West and all the other places. Sorry.
Yeah, so all of these thoughts are great thoughts and comments, and again, kind of going back and re-upping our plan as a community. I know we've had preparedness plans, but more so kind of response and recovery planning. And, you know, we all kind of in the community operate in our silos. But again, having that hub for community resources, like keeping contact with Waianae Coast Comp or Queens or fire stations or police stations or whatever. But thank you. I'm gonna move on to the next slide and keep coming with your thoughts. Again, we kind of talked about this already, but we're okay. So going back to Ronald's comments, it's really about your own situation. So maybe you have to care for a family member, or maybe you have to, you actually have to go to work to take care of work. But we as volunteers, we're okay in the disaster. We weren't necessarily impacted. So how can we organize as a community? And I know this is kind of a big question. I'm just going to leave this up here for a second. Just going to the picture. Anybody want to guess where this picture was? Kind of harder.
Looks like a mudslide on Kauai.
How did you guess that, Rodney?
Because of the mud.
Well, it could have been Haula, or yeah, it is flooding on Kauai from the same Aina Haida flooding 2018, I think, April 2018, I think it was. I threw this picture in there because this is partnerships. This is what Rodney was talking about. This gentleman is actually a resident of Waianae. He used to attend our workshops. Captain Valentine Roberts. He was a member of our team back when we started in Waianae. He is company commander for the Surf P. I'm throwing out a lot of stuff I can't remember. Anyways, the National Guard's kind of response team, and this is from the flooding. But this is just to depict, community working alongside, officials. It shouldn't be us operating in silos. It should be us working together. But anybody have any thoughts about, we're okay in this situation, this scenario, what do we do now? I'll leave this kind of open-ended, and the last couple of slides are just closing. And we talked about some things already. Go ahead, Roddy.
Yeah, we just had an HVOAD monthly meeting, and they talked about long-term recovery, and that's where we're. When you look at this, it's not the next week, it's the next years as far as for people to recover from whatever damage or whatever scenario they might have. And it does take a village to help each other, just like we did during the rains earlier this year. People got together, North Shore, etc., and helped each other as best as they could.
Yep, I think doing as much as we can, and I'm going to transition. So doing as much as we can in blue sky, so that when we are actually impacted by the incident, we're not scrambling to do stuff. And one of those, it's evident with Crystal, right? It's a theory of emergency management is get on a first name basis with everybody from different agencies or whatever. So we're not guessing who's who or what's what. The relationship, and Crystal lives in our community. But the relationship we built with Crystal in the DEM office, the relationships we build with organizations like Red Cross or HVOAD, so they know who we are. And I think now's the time for us to say, not only this is who we are, but this is what we can bring to the table with all of these partners. But that kind of closes the scenario. Maybe it's heavy stuff for some folks. I just wanted to put this kind of happier picture at the end, kind of blue sky, and what we can do right now. I know we're in the thick of hurricane season. We're all the way up to the letter G for the Eastern Pacific. I don't know what we are for the Central Pacific. But really, thank you all for participating and for sharing your thoughts. And please continue to do so. Please continue to attend the workshops. We're not done yet, but I'm just saying that to kind of open the floor. And any other thoughts anybody has for the subject of hurricane? I see some questions in the chat. Damien asked good question. Hospital church.
Okay, Bay.
Yep.
Okay.
Pokai Bay out on the Waianae side. Master Guns, was this question about kind of where people congregate? Completely forgot about churches.
Right, that was earlier.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good one for the list. Todd asked, food supply getting low, people getting desperate, crime rising? Any comments on law enforcement, or does lawlessness prevail? We all have our, maybe somebody else has a different comment, but we all have our responsibilities, and that's not ours, but we rely back on law enforcement to make sure that they police those things. Another thing is, for example, we talk about pods, right? Points of distribution. Let's say we're distributing commodities like food, water, ice, tarps. A critical part of that planning is to have security, because you may have a faction of folks in the community that want to steal those things. So we consider security in that planning. Yeah, working together. That's what it's all about. It's about building those partnerships now so we collaborate. We don't have all the answers. That's why we bring everybody to the table and see if we can fill those gaps now. I'm going to shut up.
And a good
comment. Yeah, go ahead.
And a good point is that we've just gone through COVID for 18 months, and we've done a lot of these CPODs and delivered food to help where people need it. And it's something that we can continue, is building that relationship. Hawaii Food Bank, the neighborhood security watches, Todd is a part of. That's a great aspect of the community policing team support, building and rebuilding those relationships. And I like the way that we're going right now is to rebuild.
I'll just take a second to invite everyone to, I know emails have been spotty, but you're all invited to our regular business meetings. We do them on the first Monday of every month, unless it's a major holiday, 6:30 p.m. virtually right now. If you don't see an email from me before the Monday, please shoot me an email and I'll make sure I get you that information. But that's our business meeting where we're building and using these workshops to just grow our knowledge and use it for planning. Thank you, Rodney. Any other comments?
No comments, but a quick question.
Ruben, go ahead.
And Crystal might be able to chime in on this one. CERT training was kind of put on the corner when COVID came around, and so I was just wondering when that would be restarting again, as far as CERT training.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Let me look on the website really quick as I check to see if they have a schedule out yet. Hold on.
I'll let Rodney throw in some comment because he's the Leeward CERT coordinator.
Yeah, we are reestablishing the CERT as far as after COVID, and right now we're still doing online training cycles. You can go to ready.gov and take the IS-317 class. That doesn't get you certified for a Wahoo DEM, but it gives you all the prerequisites. And we need instructors, and we're building that instructor corps back up. The goal, depending on how the tier levels go, is to be back in person, hopefully sometime in September or fiscal year in October, so that we can reestablish the classes in person. Here on the Leeward side, we're working with different venues to try to make that established. I can go in more detail later about all that stuff, but Pono, go for it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Crystal has comments, but I've heard a number of folks have been in contact with Jeff Spencer. Jeff Spencer is the program manager for the CERT on the island. He just let the instructors know, as Rodney said, they're going to allow us to return to some form of delivery in September.
Good.
I think the idea is virtually, although I believe the intent is to want to vet the instructors' virtual delivery before we actually hold a virtual class. Now, for those of you that are familiar with CERT, there's a big hands-on component. So obviously trying to figure that out. And according to Jeff, he's willing to allow the hands-on portion to be completed within the calendar year, within a year of having taken a virtual course. But as Rodney mentioned, so Rodney and I both coordinate classes all throughout the Leeward area, and as soon as we can do an in-person class, I'm ready to go. I think the idea is just when we teach CERT, we become, maybe I'm saying this in the wrong way, we become agents of the city. So we kind of have to fall back on Jeff's policy about, COVID and meeting in person. Yeah, so as soon as we can do a class out here in Leeward, you're going to know about it. Unless DEM gets to one first, and DEM traditionally held them in the basement. I don't think they're going to do any in-person thing in the basement anytime soon, but most likely the in-person community classes will happen before that. Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
And remember, you can.
No, go ahead, Rodney.
Ready.gov CERT, and you can take the class online to get you re-prepared for it. If you have your equipment already, then nothing stops you from going ahead and training right now, individually, not as a team. And that's one of our goals, is to do the in-person training. But you can go online, ready.gov CERT, and you can take all those classes online, including the instructor courses, so that you can be better prepared for when we do get together.
And I know this might not mean anything to anyone right now, but for those of you that have taken the CERT, you can count this kind of stuff as part of your CERT development, because this is part of helping community planning. So this is definitely an element of what the CERT curriculum teaches. Anyone else? No. So just to do a buddy check. I know some of you have seen it already. So this blue sky picture, whether you're still on the menti.com app or on the website, there's a thumbs up button. If you want to go ahead and just click that, just let me know that you're good and we're out of the scenario, and we don't have we kind of don't have a hurricane on the horizon. So really nothing to worry about right now. We just want to make sure that we check up on each other as community, especially sometimes, we might get into the heat of running around during hurricane and on the phone and text messaging, but it's always good and appreciated when we check on each other. So only the last thing, I'm pretty sure I know everybody on the meeting, but here's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me, or if you want to follow our social media. We're building our presence, rebranding, currently working on the website, but the evaepc.com website is still active. And if anybody needs that, if not, I'll go back to this one and we'll close. If anybody needs to leave, by all means, we'll call it quits. But if anybody wants to stay and has comments, go ahead, Rodney.
We are doing presentations via Zoom. 2 weeks ago, I did the neighborhood board for EVA about preparedness, and it worked out well, mainly Red Cross, but also Island Preparedness Group. This Saturday, we're doing one down at the Oahu Veterans Center, working with Bruce Oliveira to do a presentation down there for them. And that's also one of the places we want to try to do CERT classes, get more active participations in different communities. So if you're willing to be a presenter on a Zoom or anything else, that's something that's readily available now, is that we can help do presentations online and possibly in person to help people get as prepared as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. There's a lot to look forward to, as we kind of recover and do in-person things. You can look forward to more emails from me. There are some other communities that are currently working on plans for emergency preparedness fairs in person at the typical shopping, Kahala or Windward Mall, or in their communities between now and the end of the year. Doesn't look like we're going to plan a fair for this year, but we will definitely be back and ready to go, hopefully in 2022. But there's a lot happening, and as we slowly recover from this social distancing stuff, and Rodney's pointed at his shirt there. IPG, you have a EPC. Yeah, we do what we can, so we continue every day. Thank you all for joining us. Please join us again in the future. This was kind of a shotgun blast at everything in hurricane preparedness, but we'll have more focused workshops in the future with some guest presenters. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you guys, Wayne.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Don't forget, eat ice cream.
Thanks, Pono.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Pona. You did great.
Bye, Crystal.
Is that
Thank
Crystal, that, as far as volunteer presenter?
Yeah, if you guys want to use me for IPG to present, you know, if it falls after hours on the weekend, I have more time now as a citizen.
Something just happened.
All right, we'll do.
All right. Take care now, everyone. Good job.
Night.
Great job, Pono.
Okay,
Good night.
All right.